afterwards, but I'll try and do my best to answer questions as we go along. Are there any questions yet? No? Okay. Okay, so. Okay, now in theory, I did this. Where's my copy of this? I've lost my paper. Oh, that's a problem. Okay, my presentation tracks the text. And since I thought graphically displaying the text on the screen would be really directly, I just tried to take the main points and put them in the PowerPoint. Okay, so one of the things that I've learned from looking at information technology in the business law context is that, how many people know what I'm talking about if I say personalization? That's like the new wave of what's happening with all this information technology. It's like the end of the standardization that came with mass production, that you just have to put up with the products that they deliver to you, because the increased bandwidth and the increased computing power that's available, pervasively in the system now can permit the end user to have a more customized interface with technology. And so that's one of the themes that's sweeping the real world outside the ivory tower of higher education. And my concern as a faculty member looking at how information technology is debated in the academy is that people don't recognize that this represents a fundamental shift in power in favor of the learner. That this is that there's been an underlying trend towards consumerism in higher education for a long time, 20, 30 years. But this is something that's going to decisively tip the balance in favor of the learner as the person paying the bills and the consumer of the service. And that so many resources in legal education today are directed towards things that have only tangential or apparently no payoff for the learner. Those activities have to be examined critically, like publishing law review articles that no one reads. And the energy that goes into that could usefully be redirected towards focusing on how this technology can produce a better learning environment for the student. One of the things that this more personalized information technology can deliver is experiential learning. This is what I think is another really critical issue about multimedia, is that one of the things that I have struggled with unsuccessfully is to find the nutshell on learning theory. Has anybody found one? Like the definitive authoritative text that's like 200 words or less? Not 200 words, 200 pages? No. Okay, so having spun my wheels on that for ages and ages, I've just given up trying to cite the authoritative theory that justifies that. But I think at some intuitive level we all know that learning experientially is a more vivid and effective learning experience for the learner. And the way that I explain it, just my own way of explaining it, is they don't have to learn to be a student. They go directly from being unschooled to being competent in the end result skill that you're trying to communicate. And in fact, my intuition is that the people who populate higher education today are the ones who can master the multiple steps involved in abstracting up to the level of the educational system and then reconnecting with the final result. And that skill of being able to abstract up and then come back down is one that's going to be a lot less demand when information technology makes experiential learning the standard. All of the things that qualified us for the jobs that we have today will become largely irrelevant. And the people who can directly empathize with the end user and make that experience vivid without going up to the level of academic theory and abstraction are the ones who are going to have the really important skills. One of the things that I try and explain to people, John Mayer talks in his paper about one of the initial thoughts that people often have when they look at what this technology can do is they say, well, gosh, like Arthur Miller is going to colonize the universe. And maybe it's possible. I have my doubts. So the question is, what ultimately is this going to do? And what I try and emphasize is that if we as faculty members remain critically involved in the process of integrating this technology into the curriculum, the ultimate objective of the technology can be to produce a more meaningful face-to-face live human interaction between the faculty member and the student. That's the contribution that we can make as faculty members in helping to design the curriculum with this new technology. That what I say is like, see, if every law school interaction were like an upper level seminar with students who were really prepared and engaged, and you could have a discussion about interesting points. As a UGC professor, you spend a lot of time talking about the semicolons and the actual syntax of the statute. If you could give that to the computer, that rote drill, so that everybody came in on the same page, or like preferences. How many people remember preferences in bankruptcy? Oh, it takes 2 days to explain the statute. Okay, so you could assign that to the computer, and then in class time you could start to say, well, does it make any sense to penalize creditors for receiving preferences? And you would have actually a meaningful discussion with almost all the people in the room, as opposed to just 1 or 2 large students. Okay. Now, one of the promises that I think that this technology brings is the question is, who's the constituency that we're serving? One of the problems with consumerism that's controlled by for-profit enterprises is that they get to define who the consumer is. Okay, now if the consumer is the law student, the question is, does the law student feel good about the education they're receiving? As educators, we have a problem with that, because as educators, we have a fiduciary duty to help the law students' tastes and their understanding of themselves and what they want evolve. For us, that's a moving target. And the problem is that if somebody's trying to make profit quickly off of delivering educational materials that are recognized as being value for money, they're going to pander to the lowest common denominator in the student's consciousness of what they want. And the faculty can have a much broader conception of what the law student might evolve into over the course of legal education. And they might ask them to grow through the curriculum rather than just amusing them with the equivalent of computer games. And another question is, but why is the student even defined as the end user? Isn't the end user in a democratic society the public? What's the point of the rule of law? It's to make the democracy that we live in work. And so I think that as faculty members, as members of a not-for-profit organization, we can stake a claim to that larger public interest as our constituency that we're working for in the design of legal educational materials to sensitize students to those issues during their legal education so that when they're practicing lawyers, it matters. And I think that once we learn how to teach law students and empower them to be really effective attorneys, you can take the same technology, you can take a lot of the same materials, and you can empower the public at large to understand the legal issues that they confront every day. And if we ask the ABA if that's what they want to do, the answer the first 10 times is going to be no. If they think about it, there's a possibility that just like technology can raise the level of discourse between the faculty and the student person, there's a possibility that a better informed, better prepared public would have a more engaged dialogue with the attorney who's representing them. But I think that would be a hard sell for a lot of people at the ABA today. So the idea that we can use this technology to more effectively fulfill the fundamental mission of law schools as not-for-profit enterprises is something that really interests me. And this is why, if you look at John Mayer's paper in the materials, he says one of the things that interests him is the science fiction genre where you change one fact and then spin out, like say Kennedy survived, okay? So what I thought he was going to say was, imagine a world without CALI. Because the way that I'm looking at this, I think that there is tremendous profit potential for for-profit content providers to jump right over our heads as faculty members and enter into a dialogue with students about what students want and with law firms about what law firms want. And if that's the dialogue that takes place and the faculty aren't in the loop, there's going to be an erosion in the content of our work, and there's going to be an erosion in our compensation package. And I think that CALI is like the best hope that we have. I think that John Mayer is just like a fabulous resource that this organization has and that the legal education community has. So I think that what John Mayer is trying to do in terms of democratizing technology and to engage a broader and broader base of participation is exactly the way it needs to be, and I think that the law schools need to rise to meet the challenge that he's setting for them. Okay, so if you look at my paper in the materials, I have like two sort of narratives. One is like Enlightenment ideals are realized, civil society reaches full fruition, and the good life is achieved. Okay, the alternative is we just live with like schlocky commercial legal education, and they have Prozac in the drinking water. So, so the concern, like I said, is that if the people who are evaluating the process determine success or failure by process, there is going to be a profound erosion in the content. And I think that we can all spin out the consequences. I mean, John Mayer's alternative scenarios explain quite clearly that if profit is the objective, it's extremely unlikely that legal education is going to survive in the form that it is today. There's going to be increased stratification. There's going to be, an elite that works out some kind of collaborative system with the proprietary vendors. The rest of us are all going to become basically adjuncts. My concern is that what the ABA thinks is good for America. I mean, I'm an active member of the ABA. I'm 6 subcommittees. Okay, so it's not that I'm not involved in the ABA. I don't think that the ABA does good work. It's just that I don't think the ABA should be the guardian of the fundamental values of the American legal system. And I think that what faculty members need to realize is that this is a medium through which the kind of critical thinking that we express today in law review articles and in stand-up classroom instruction is something that can be communicated, and that we need to make sure that our independent critical perspective is heard and becomes part of the debate. Okay, so that's like the big picture. Let's see it. Okay. Now, I've been working with multimedia stuff since 1995, and one of the fundamental conclusions that I have come to is that if this is what we're talking about, me standing up here and I've got a projector, it's like, oh great, it's really difficult to justify the expense of the LCD projector and wiring every seat in the room. The payoff is just not there, and let's be honest, right? I mean, if this is all we're aiming for, forget it. I mean, we could have done the same thing in photocopiers, right? I mean, I could have printed it out and photocopied it, or I could have used how much does an overhead projector cost? $125? I could have used an overhead projector in transparency. There is no business case for spending the money to wire classrooms if this is all we're doing. Okay, so I'll concede that right at the outset. If all of you wanted to come here and hear me say how PowerPoint can revolutionize legal education, I'm here to say it's never going to happen. Okay. The alternative, though, I'm still convinced. Like I said, I've been beating my head against this wall since about 1995, and I still believe that there is tremendous potential in this, and this proves either that I'm a slow learner or that I'm persistent. Okay, now, there was a thing on public broadcasting, and it was picked up in the newspapers about a week ago, about people who are extremely at risk of AIDS because of intravenous drug use or large number of sexual partners who were of a demographic group that it was very difficult to reach with traditional education. It was the National Institute of Health, wasn't it? Everybody heard what I said? And they said, what they did, do you remember the instructional techniques that they used? It was role-playing. They got them to do role-playing. I mean, they got like one guy to pretend to be the girl, and the other guy to be the guy, and they were going to talk about like the guy had to sell the other guy who was pretending to be the girl on safe sex. And they did these role-plays until they got it to the point where the guy could say something that everybody in the room felt was plausible. And so what they said was that after that, after doing these role-playing exercises and having a very contextualized learning environment, a year later, 60% of the people who went through that process were still practicing safe sex, which is like phenomenally better result than anything that had ever been achieved in any other, sex education program. And so when I heard that, I thought, I still never found the theoretical justification for it, but experiential learning works. I mean, it's a more personal, vivid experience for the learner. And that's what multimedia can do. And the people who are doing it today are the computer game people. I mean, if you don't believe that it's true, look at what they do with computer games. And there is an ability, I mean, how many people have, I don't personally play computer games, but I buy computer games sometimes just to look at the interface. And for example, I mean, a game like Myst or Ribbon, it's for people who play this, like in all sincerity, and don't just look at the graphics. Don't you have an experience that you have moved into the computer, that there's a space in the computer and you have moved into it? I mean, that's what computers are capable of in the hands of, computer programs are capable of in the hands of professional computer designers. Okay, so what multimedia can do, because it can lower the cost of experiential learning, it can help law students to spend more time directly learning to be lawyers. The computer can be the client, or the computer can be the other side of the negotiation. And in terms of what I learned taking all those classes in Autoware, the one thing that I would say is that in terms of designing the interactivity so that the computer can simulate another human being, my understanding, and I'm not a professional, but my understanding is that the best result you're going to get is if you have a spectrum of choices which simulate the universe of possible responses. getting an interactive program to permit the end user to freely type in their own text is just like a hallucinating problem. I mean, in order to get the computer to evaluate the meaning of what the person typed in their own words, that's rocket science. I mean, it's like, our ability as non-professionals to do that is going to be extremely limited for a while. So in the short term, the only way you can get a computer program to simulate being a lawyer is to imagine the universe of possible responses that the client might have, display them, let the student, interact with that. And so there's a lot of theatricality involved. There's a lot of whether or not you can realistically generate a spectrum of plausible responses on the part of the person that you're building into the computer. So that's the constraint that I understand right now to be the limitation. And this is, okay, for a couple of years now, I've gone to the Macromedia Users Conference, which is, it's like 5,000 people at the Moscone Center in San Francisco. And as far as I've been able to tell, I buzz around the halls looking. I'm the only law professor who goes there. So I'll tell you, I'll bring you this thought so you don't have to pay quite a lot of money and go to Moscone Center for 3 days in October. Okay, Michael Allen is the guy, he's a PhD in education or something. He designed AuthorWare in its earlier iteration before it was bought out by Macromedia. And so he's like one of the great, patriarchal figures of interactive, learning, instructional materials. And he's also a witty and charming guy and gives these presentations about let me tell you the big picture. And so what he said, I'm telling you right here, this is the best thing I learned at all these Macromedia conferences. The question is, for the person with the computer program, is there any uncertainty? Is there any unresolved question as they move forward through the program? If the program is like shooting fish in a barrel, if it's like there's no dramatic tension about how it's going to be resolved, then you've lost them. And that's a hard thing to design in. That's a very significant aesthetic question, which is, and one of the things, the point I made in the written materials is that I think that's a very close analog to stand-up classroom instruction. My guess is that anybody who takes the experience of being a stand-up teacher seriously knows at an intuitive level that it is a theatrical experience. That that you're the performer and you have to engage the students. That there has to be some kind of catharsis on the part of the students as they move through the materials and achieve greater insight. So what I'm suggesting is that faculty members, if they apply themselves to seeing the connections, should be very good at transferring the theatrical skills that they've developed in classroom instruction to this medium. So that's my suggestion. Okay, what does multimedia do badly? This is full disclosure. Okay, if you produce multimedia with directly graphics, it's going to annoy the people in the audience, and then it's annoying. They're so annoyed by the directly graphics that it's a problem. And this is one of the problems about, the consumerism of law students, the increasing demanding quality of law students about things not meeting their expectations. I watch almost no television, but when I watch television, I'm just blown away by the number of 3D computer renderings, etc. I mean, the sophistication of young people who have grown up watching the media on television is extremely high. And this is one of the reasons why in higher education, we're at risk of having some for-profit enterprise head us off at the pass, which is they can meet the aesthetic expectation of the students more easily than we can. Okay, they can produce something which is extremely slick, which resonates with the student as being like a distant cousin of MTV. Okay, and then we're standing up there with our schlocky PowerPoint. So we are at a competitive disadvantage, and it needs to be taken seriously. And so one of the things that I'm trying to emphasize is that multimedia is very expensive to do well. And the only business case for investing all that money, and you've got to compute some cost in training faculty. So it's whether it's the human capital cost of teaching people how to do this and how to use it, or whether it's the buying the equipment and the software, or whether it's paying the salaries of the support staff that work with the faculty. It's a very expensive proposition to do well, and I remain convinced that the investment is justified. Okay, so the other shortcoming that I've observed is that my basic feeling is that multimedia exists in two formats. One of them is what we're doing right now, which is open presentation, and I'm sharing this with you. The other one is one-on-one. The student interacts with the computer. And if something was designed for one-on-one interaction and you bring it into the classroom, how many people have tried to do that? Like take the interactive courtroom as class. Have people tried to do that? I mean, it's possible, but I don't teach skills, so I haven't ever tried to do that. But my impression is that it hijacks your course. That the interactive structure is so intensely designed to draw the student's attention into the program that it's competing with you, it's fighting with you for the classroom student's attention. So if you're going to design multimedia that incorporates the same elements as you see in an interactive courtroom, like video clips or whatever, it has to be designed with spontaneous interaction in mind. So there has to be, for example, a good searching tool. I mean, looking at the evidence tutorials in interactive courtroom, it would seem to me obvious that a student might raise their hand and say, like, well, how is this hearsay exception related to the one we did last week? And so you would want to have a search engine in the program that would allow you to type in the section number of the rule of evidence that you did last week, and then you could flip on your screen from one to the other, and you say, well, this one is about this, and that one was about that, and the difference is very small, but it's significant. Okay. Now, the program, the interactive courtroom, wasn't designed with that in mind, as far as I understand it. It was designed with a focused use by one person in mind. So that's just something that needs to be taken into account, because how many people use PowerPoint for their class? How many people find that PowerPoint sometimes stultifies class discussions? Because you get people on a track, right? I mean, even in PowerPoint, you can see exactly that problem stylistically. And I don't know, for those of you who feel like you've resolved that issue, I don't know how you've done it. What I do is I put, those hokey little questions in the casebook? That's all I put in my PowerPoint now, is the points that I want to use to anchor the discussion. So that otherwise you just get students just like slavishly copying everything off the PowerPoint slide. If you put like substantive points into them. So you see the same tension with PowerPoint, that you can make the learning experience extremely passive, and you can turn yourself into a droning voice at your side. Or you can try and use the PowerPoint as a springboard for discussion, which is, with PowerPoint it's kind of limited. But, I mean, John Mayer did a lot better than I did. Did you notice that he had animations going in his and mine is just static? But I don't use PowerPoint graphics at all. Okay. So I gave up those templates a year ago. I decided they're just tedious. Okay. So the question is, okay, so what is multimedia? Multimedia is, video, audio, etc. And delivered through a computer. And the question is, okay, we know what we're doing today in legal education. How should we introduce multimedia into legal education? And like I said, I've been on this quest of trying to find, because I want to write a large article and I have to have something to put in the footnotes, right? So I've been on this quest. It would be nice to know the right answer, but I believe I already know the right answer. I'm just looking for something to justify it. Okay, so I'll tell you the book that I found in the last month, which when I found it, I felt like this overwhelming flood of recognition, which is, and this is like really embarrassing to admit, but I said I would admit all this stuff, it's Re-Engineering the Corporation by Hammer and Champion. How many people remember that? It's like a business management evangelist text. It was published in 1993, and at my university, they actually handed out copies to all the administrators, and they were all running around having like focus groups and stuff. Okay, so it's like so embarrassing and so tacky that I never read the book. And when I actually went back and read it, if you put to one side the gushy, evangelistic tone of most of it, I mean, it is not an academic book. One of the points they make is that if you take your existing institutional organization and you introduce new information technology incrementally, you just paste it in to small functions, you are going to get a tiny increment in productivity increases. If you stop what you're doing and you sit down and you say, what is the fundamental nature of this enterprise in which we are engaged, and you identify your fundamental objectives, you look at the technology and you say, what's the best way to get from here to there? You can get things like 90% improvement in productivity. And what they're talking about is eliminating all the paperwork and clerical work associated with information flow within a corporation. So taking their model, which is very clearly articulated for corporations and business processes, and transferring it to education is not easy. They don't focus on that problem at all. But what I'm trying to suggest is that if we all sat down and we said, let's not talk about how can I use PowerPoint better in the classroom to justify the expense of the LCD projector and wiring every student's seat, and we say, what is the fundamental objective of legal education? What does this new technology do? And how can we apply the technology to fulfilling our ultimate mission better? Which is what I understood the parent to be saying at the beginning here. that we're standing on the threshold of an opportunity to re-examine our basic premises. And furthermore, I would say that if we decline the invitation to do that, the consequence will be for-profit providers will do it for us. And they'll do it in a way that is profoundly diminishing of the society we live in. I mean, you know, and I'm a business law professor and I believe in capitalism. Okay? So what I'm saying is that this book, the Reengineering the Corporation book, seems to me to be the best description of the challenge that we're facing right now in legal education. So I'm here to say that I think that the payoff, the business case for investing in multimedia, will only be realized in the context of re-examining how you put legal education together. And there needs to be a greater focus on what it means for law students to become competent lawyers, and there needs to be ultimately a focus on what it means for legal professionals to serve American society. Okay, I think that's, I mean, the personalization of information technology, I think, leads inexorably to a focus on the student. And if we don't want to do it, there are people who will do it for us. Okay, so I think that just, okay. Now, the other thing is, okay, given that producing multimedia well is extremely expensive, both in time, in equipment, in teaching people new things, how can you justify it? And this is where, because I do electronic commerce, it seems to me that the justification for that investment has to be wider distribution. That multimedia is ultimately going to supplant the casebook. And if I keep trying to convince my colleagues that isn't you, that if we were to produce some content, some multimedia curricular content, and we were to license it on reasonable terms to other law schools, we could recapture through that licensing, if we had a critical mass, we could recapture all of our development costs. If the only thing we're going to do is use it in my individual classroom, I have to admit up front, it's my hobby and I'm doing it for fun. Because there's no way to justify the huge amount of effort that has to be put into it. Now, if you say, okay, the only reason to justify the huge investment in resources required to do this is broader distribution, then it raises the question of standards. And this is another point that I've learned over the last year through all this work on electronic commerce, is that one of the fundamental political issues that we're going to face as we move into a quote-unquote information economy is the question of how we control the standard-setting process of a democratic society. That there are organizations like the American National Standards Institute, which are just like, in their organization, they're just like, not just like, but they're substantially similar to the Uniform Law Commission. They hold open public meetings. You're welcome to attend. The Internet Engineering Task Force will allow anybody who shows up to walk in the door and sit down at the table and talk about Internet standards. So there are standard-setting processes which are very open, which can be made accountable, which can facilitate broad-based participation. There are other standard-setting processes which are sort of typified by the Microsoft approach, which is proprietary. How many people have heard of digital signatures? I do that a lot in electronic commerce. You know, authentication technology. Do you know that that's all a patent? It's the Reiber-Shamir-Edelman technology that was patented by some MIT professors. There's a group of people who own the patents on that technology in 99% of all the existing commercial applications. Okay, so you can create a very broadly based standard which is owned. Okay, so this is something that we need to focus on, is the politics of standard setting. So you'll notice red. This is to indicate that this is like pivotal point in the lecture. Okay, so okay. Multimedia is so complex. Getting all the elements to interoperate together is so complex. There is a crying, desperate need for standard setting. One thing I learned at the Macromedia conference last year is that there is an industry organization, which I didn't have time to go to my filing cabinet and get out the URL. But there's an industry organization that is developing standards for file formats and network connections, etc., associated with distance learning using interactive multimedia. As a wild guess, this is the moment for audience participation. As a wild guess, what industry do you think is leading? There is a bricks and mortar goods and services industry out there leading the drive for standard setting in multimedia educational content. Wild guess. I don't hear anything. Pardon? Madison? Oh, medicine. No, that's very good. I'm sure they do, but they don't show up at Macromedia either. So I think that's a tilt. I think you're right, absolutely, that this technology is extremely advanced in medicine, and I'm going to learn about that later. Okay, so you may be right, but I don't know. Okay, any other guesses besides this? Engineers. That's pretty close. Aerospace. Aerospace? Okay, yeah, why aerospace? Because the aerospace industry is continuously modifying those airplanes. How long does an airplane last? They originally fought like 10 years. Now they last 35, okay? So they're continuously upgrading the maintenance on those airplanes as well as developing new airplanes. How many people in the world buy airplanes? You know, 120 different countries speaking 240 different languages. Okay, now Boeing cannot send around a human being trainer with a paper manual and have classes around the world everywhere that they're selling those airplanes, or that they're sending out maintenance upgrades. Okay, now, so Boeing has a huge training problem that people have to know how to use these airplanes and how to maintain them and how to upgrade them. What's the downside if they're not taught properly? Okay? Are you serious? Okay. So, the aerospace industry in Seattle is one of the most advanced industries in the United States with regard to computer-based instruction. Okay? And so it's like, this is what I'm saying to you guys, it's like, in the private sector, these standards are being developed. Now, I don't think there's anything particularly threatening about the aerospace industry deciding on the graphic standards, the video standards, the transmission and display standards, the platform with the PC. I don't find that particularly threatening. But that's like the thin end of the wedge. That's the beginning of the standard setting process. And there needs to be that kind of collaborative standard setting process within higher education generally, and also within legal education. There needs to be a focus among faculty members that this matters. Just like the Uniform Law Commission, I do UTC, so the Uniform Law Commission. I mean, people show up for the Uniform Law Commission on their own nickel. They read the draft and they debate it out of a sense of public spirit, or, you know, they're paid by some body or everything. The American National Standards Institute developed standards. This is, okay, we're digressing into electronic commerce. I was in Mexico on vacation recently. I put my ATM card into one of the, it was like, I don't know, bankers in Nuevo León, and the little slip came out, and you know what it told me? I had like 120,000 pesos in my account. Okay, now why did it say that? Because during the time I was standing in front of the machine, real time, it accessed my balance in Dallas, and it just translated into Spanish. Okay, now how is that possible? That is an American National Standards Institute Committee for Financial Organization that have worked out all the ATM standards. That's why all those ATM machines interoperate globally. Okay? It's an organizations like ANSI develop standards that are now incorporated into the technology. So this edifice is beginning to go up, and we have to participate in the standard setting process. And if we're not, if we don't, if the standard setting process is done by, do you know who's interested in education as a potential profitable enterprise? Did you know that that's one of Michael Milton's activities now that he's out of prison? Okay. You know, the Huns are looming on the horizon. You know, between Michael, yes.
As long as the standard is clear, and very few of us are technical know that we must use one at all. So the reason why all the standards are to use them, that ain't just technical standards, nobody can use them.
As long as they're just technical standards, you know, like so that all of our electric appliances all plug into the wall plug, as long as they're simply technical standards, that's fine. But the problem is that there's going to be, it's like form and substance, you know, you're a law professor, right? It's like, when does a problem of form become a problem of substance? Okay, so the technical form of the standards has the potential to foreclose the content. What I'm saying is that as faculty members, we want to retain an openness and a critical perspective in the debate about the content, and if we're not in the standard setting process, we don't know when that's going to be foreclosed, and we're going to end up with standards that produce nothing but computer games. You see what I'm saying? You're right, at some point, it's engineering issues, but the engineering issues as the standard setting process advances will come to foreclose possible content alternatives. For example, whether or not the multimedia can access only proprietary databases for primary and secondary legal materials. You see how eventually, as the debate continues, arbitrated you know. Okay, that's my moral conviction, and we can get together in 2 years and we'll find out if I was right or wrong.
A lot of examples might be the debate now between fair use and paper review.
Okay, so you mean, I know about that from 2B, the whole question of whether you can completely gut fair use with shrink-wrap contracts. Right, I mean, are you familiar, sir, are you familiar with that example? Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Yeah, but my experience that the technical standards are unlikely to remain exclusive. I mean, it's Microsoft Windows. Is that a technical standard? Is the Microsoft that technical standard? I think that has tremendous social, political, economic implications. It's not just technical. Because as vendors move into it and seek to establish control over the process in order to profit from it, the standards are going to expand to include not just engineering issues. Okay, that's my belief. Okay, so and there you've seen that's an issue that can be debated. Okay, so the next point of the presentation was to talk about programs, and since it's already getting quite late, I'm going to at this point I'm going to refer you to the materials on the website and in the handbook to say that there's all different kinds of programs that you can use, and what I tried to do is to give like little thumbnail sketches to evaluate. If you want more information, I updated my own personal knowledge by going on LexisNexis and getting up, the commercial product evaluations. So that was some attempts to give you an overview of all the different programs that are available. And like I said, I think that David Simon's presentation is going to be a lot more focused on specific application issues. Okay, what are the major obstacles to doing multimedia today? Lack of standardization in the Winn platform. This is one of the things that's driven me bananas as a person with no technical background. Is the whole question of what will display on somebody else's machine properly. The number of things that I've had to learn or have learned in order to understand why it looks okay on my computer but not on my colleagues down the hall. Lack of standardization in the way people access. Okay, the problem is that if you're making your thing with 3 different applications, you spend an awful lot of time on the support line trying to figure out why something that you did in one program doesn't display properly in another program. Those kinds of problems with passing time we can expect will become fewer. And right now, one of the problems I think is I didn't start doing this until after I got tenure, and I'm here to say that I absolutely recommend that. If you don't have tenure, just smile and nod and put this on the back burner because it will crater your career. Okay, basic production principles. Because everything I ever tried to do took literally no joke. I always thought, I'll allow a lot of time because it always takes longer than you think. And so I'd allow what I thought was a phenomenal amount of time, and then it took like 8 times longer. Okay, so if you're trying to accomplish a certain number of things on schedule in order to get tenure, it's just very problematic. Okay, basic production principles. This is a thumbnail sketch of what I learned in that basic audio and video production. Is that the production process is divided into pre-production, production, and post-production. And if you wait until post-production to find out about a problem, you have just condemned yourself to redo all of your inputs. And so until you've worked through one project once, it's very difficult to do pre-production effectively and recognize all the problems. And in a minute I'm going to display a couple of videos and you'll see how I didn't do the pre-production properly the first time and I did it better the second time. How many people know what a storyboard is? Okay, so that's like no problem. Okay, and then test. This is, of course, in the materials I admit. Last year I tried to submit something for the talent competition, and I worked 18 hours a day for 3 days over a weekend because I had already missed the deadline, and John said I didn't have what extra days. Okay, I sent off this entire slew of videos. It took up like a whole zip disk. They were all garbage. Okay, so the moral of the story is progressive iterations. Do a little bit, test it. Do a little bit more, test it. Never commit very much time to anything until you've tested it to make sure you're getting the reaction that you want. Okay, here, so this is where we compare the 2 video clips. Okay, now I'll tell you, this is another one where I just had one of those, like, I'm going to vomit experiences. Okay, like I said, I've gotten pretty good at persuading my colleagues in the administration. Why do my colleagues in the administration at SMU bankroll all these little experiments, given how few ultimate deliverables I produce? Because the administration is scared witless. I mean, they're the ones who are really focusing on the threat to higher education as an economic franchise. Okay, so I've learned to talk, and I've managed to con them out of a lot of stuff. Okay, so my first try, this is what I did last year, and I displayed this last year, and I admitted that it hadn't turned out the way I wanted. I'll tell you what we did. I explained the equipment that I used, the price of the equipment. I used a VHS video camera. It's like a $1,000 video camera. You know, it wasn't like a piece of junk. But VHS is a really crappy format for doing multimedia. Okay, so, and I had, this is the key here, I had a $350 video capture card. So it worked. It captured. And when I was looking on my computer and I was working in Premiere, everything looked fine. Now, one of the problems that we're having is that apparently Adobe Premiere is coming out with 5.0 like right now, this month, June, and it has better audio functions in it. But right now, one of the great weaknesses of Adobe Premiere is that if it's the audio that goes with the actual filming, it's very difficult to improve the quality of the audio, whereas if you're taking something that you tape recorded and you're superimposing like the narrator's voice, you can use an audio editing program and clean up that audio track dramatically. So you have a problem in quality that, like, the narrator's voice was cleaned up outside of Premiere, but the voices in the room, I'm trapped with the bad audio in Premiere. Okay, so here's this video. Well, okay. What's happening? What's from it? Oh, okay, we'll just start that over again. Okay, so it hung up for some reason. Okay, so while we're waiting for the program to reload and everything, I'll tell you what the difference is between the two. Okay, so the first one, I had a perfectly nice Pentium computer, I had a crappy video capture card, and I had VHS. And one of the main things I learned was that VHS is not accessible. Even though you think it's only going to be a little thing on people's computers, it produces very poor quality digital video. So I went back to the drawing board, and fortunately we were able to get funding from a foundation that gave us money to upgrade our technology. And so I went to a media integrator in Dallas, and I caused them to put together a system for me. I said, I cannot build this system myself. I want you to put it together for me and warrant that it's going to work. And more or less that's worked. Okay, so the second system costs a lot more money. Okay, here we go. Okay, do you notice the problem? Okay, that's natural light. That's ambient light in the room. I didn't use a light kit. Okay, so the first thing is you got to have a light kit. You got to learn 3-point lighting, and you got to have a light kit. I didn't know that. Okay, so can you hear that? Can you hear how scratchy the audio got when we shifted? That's an omnidirectional mic that's in the room. Okay, now these are the action counts of my colleagues. Okay, now this is the second try. Now look, here, we're talking like close to $2 for the equipment, okay? So I bought a brand new computer, I bought a $2,000 video capture card. Now the important thing about this video capture card is in theory it's supposed to work with either analog or digital. And the new digital standard is FireWire. FireWire is the colloquial name, it's actually an engineering standard. But they said because of the faster data transfer rates associated with that, I had to have a SCSI ultra-wide controller and a SCSI ultra-wide hard drive. It's like, oh, ask your technical guy what that means. Okay, but it's faster data transfer rates, okay? We bought a $3,500 Sony digital camcorder that's a FireWire compatible camcorder. The home digital camcorders, my guess is, are not FireWire compatible. So the idea is that you minimize the number of digital to analog conversions that the video image goes through, so you end up with a much cleaner image. And we got a light kit, and we got a semi-professional tape deck. So the idea was by upgrading all the equipment that we used throughout, we could preserve a better image quality, in theory. So now this is, okay, I'll tell you what happened. This is like really like, I'm just gonna resign. When we got all this equipment, and I got the guy from the media integrator, and we put the cassette tape that I shot last December into the camcorder in May, and we displayed it. It cracked up on the screen. It was like, remember the old days when you had like an antenna? I just coughed, reading a video file, and it doesn't work. Okay. What we discovered was, I was displaying it on this Canon that we bought last December. I had shot it on a Sony. So I went back across the campus. I borrowed back the Sony camcorder, brought it back. It was also a FireWire. And we played the tape back on the camcorders that had shot the tape, and it was perfect. But I had like, boy, we're talking for a few hours there. I was really, really terrified. I mean, at some point I'm going to have to produce something that works. Okay, now, look at this. Can you see the wood grain? Isn't that amazing? I mean, I think it's electrifying. I mean, I hate to say it, but you can see the wrinkles in his face. You can see the plaid on his shirt. Okay, now, so I would say, I feel I have resolved the video quality issue. By spending that much more on the equipment, I think this is acceptable. You can tell me if you think that's true or not. I mean, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm just wasting my university money. Now, I don't know what the speakers are like. Could you hear that or not? You really can't hear that. I don't know where's the guy who this is, but I need something that turns up the speakers. Okay. These are on my website. This presentation is on my website, and you can, but please, go to my website, play, this is called Fred Text, okay? The other one is called Old Fred, okay? So this is Fred Text. Play Fred Text and send me an email. Now, I admit I'm going to be out of the country for the summer, but I mean, send me an email. And if you, because this is what we're talking about testing. If you can't get it to play on your computer and you're sure that it's not a technical problem with your computer, I would really like to know about that. But what I would say is that if you've got acceptable audio on your computer, you should be able to hear the warmth of the room in the audio. I mean, I feel like we really resolved the issue. As in terms of the audio quality, he's using a clip-on mic instead of an omnidirectional mic down in the room. And I spent a lot of time on the support line with the Adobe Premiere people to get this straightened out. And the file size is much bigger. It's a much larger file, but I feel like we resolved the technical problems. So the objective is, what are we doing this for? The objective is that the deadline is next February to submit it for CALI for the 99-2000 distribution of CALI tutorials. So that's what all this is we're working on. And I see that I only have 5 minutes left. I was going to do this little thing where I was going to have Mr. Black come on, who's going to say, I'm having a great time at CALI. And then I was going to edit it in Premiere. But do you want to try and do that, or do you want all my go like have coffee? Are there questions? I mean, there's no time for Q&A. We're going to do a little live demo. Do you want to do it or not? Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, then Mr. Black will come up here. Okay. Okay, I'm going to shut down everything else so we don't crash the computer. Okay, so. Okay. So I went out, I told John Mayer that I bought the Kinectix QuickCam for this presentation, and he actually fell for it. I bought it to play with it and send me. Okay, so this Kinectix QuickCam cost $114 at CompUSA with my SMU educational discount. And it doesn't require a capture card. Here, hello, you can see me. Okay, so now here, Mr. Blackwell, here, you say, I'm happy to be at CALI. Point it on your face there. Okay. There you go. Wait, okay, just make it. Oh, here's the microphone. Okay.
I'm happy to be here at CALI.
There he is. Okay, so now we've got a little clip. This is for video conferencing too. I haven't figured out how to use that yet, but in theory you can do video conferencing over your internet connection if the person on the other hand has the same one. Okay, save as. My guess is that that's a processor speed thing. We're going to find out when we open it up in Premiere. But my guess is that the display froze because the processor was completely consumed with taking the video. You see what I mean? That it was, with me it's just displaying, but with him it was saving it, and that consumes the computer momentarily. Okay, so this is td.av. Oh, we want to save it as an AVI. Okay, AVI, whoops, well, that's pretty weird. Okay, I guess we're going to save it as a DFW file. Okay, I just got this, I see. Okay, it's supposed to save as a wait a minute, compression. Can I choose AVI? AVI is video for Windows. Microsoft Video 1, we'll save it as that. Okay. You rapidly, when you get into Adobe Premiere, you rapidly get into all of these horrible problems about different video compression formats and stuff. And the only solution that I've found is call up Adobe support and make them explain it to you. Okay? Now, Adobe has a lot of information on their, oops, we lost that. Shoot, okay. Okay, so now here we're going to open it up in Premiere. Okay, thank you very much for the welcome. Okay. Just, how many people use Photoshop? A lot of people have used Photoshop. When I first got Photoshop, I didn't know how to take pictures except with like a point and shoot camera, and so that was another thing I did. I took an undergraduate basic photography course. So if you already knew how, if you were already an accomplished photographer and you used Adobe Premiere, did you find that it was pretty intuitive if you were already a photographer or not? People who are accomplished photographers with like 35mm cameras, did you find Photoshop fairly intuitive? Because Adobe Premiere is intuitive the same way for people who have ever used video editing equipment. How many of us is that clear? Okay, so it's tough. Now, one thing that I explained last year that I'll explain again this year is one of the things that Adobe does is really phenomenal is they have this classroom in a book series that they produce. And I have looked at a lot of training manuals and, wait a minute, shoot, I'm going to have to do the, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to find it with the, Explorer. The Classroom in a Book series is absolutely essential to learning to use a program like Adobe Premiere, and it's really I'm sorry, I saved you there. Windows. There you go. Okay, so program files. I'm sorry. I'm interfering with everyone's copyright. Connecting. It isn't. Oh, it's in copyright. Okay. There it is. Okay, so here we've got Mr. Blackwell in Adobe Premiere. We're going to say, here's a clip, it's an input. We'll say, yes, I want him to be part of my project. I'll put him in here. And then we'll say, not only is he part of my project, but I'm going to put him in my construction window. Okay, so we're going to put him there in the construction window. Okay, so now we can display. Now you're concerned with that it looks like he turned into a still photo, right? Okay, so we'll find out. Now, you see how blurry he is? This is what happens. Just there's no video capture card at all. You just directly like the the $114 equipment there.
I'm happy to be here to tell.
There you go. That's not too bad, right? Okay. Okay. Now wait a minute. We gotta do the okay. File. Okay. Shoot. What we're going to do was Adobe. We're going to combine Mr. Blackwell with one of the Premiere sample videos. That's what we're going to do. Where's the motion? Oh, sorry. 1 minute. Nope. Sorry. I didn't prepare this demo well enough there. We're gonna. Okay, I tell you what. We'll just do him twice. Okay, here. So we're putting him on the second track, and then we're going to have a transition. You want to have a band transition? Put it in there, and we'll scoot that over. Oops, we're separating him from his. Okay, that's right. Okay, so Adobe Premiere will allow you to do basically the same functions that they do on like the TV news. All those like really hokey transitions and stuff they do. Okay, now you see here at the bottom here it has output options and compression. This is what I'm saying, is that without reading the manual from Adobe Premiere and working with the support staff on the telephone, it's like light years too complicated for anybody who's not actually experienced in TV production to figure out. Okay, now, we just made this important movie here. Okay, let's see what happens here.
Not happy to be here to tell it. Not happy to be here to tell it.
It costs for Adobe Premiere. I was wondering if it's $2 a minute like the cost for Adobe when you're using
$2 a minute.
$2 a minute.
Oh, it's $25 for service calls, I think. I don't know about occasional, but when I call up, they open the file number, they assign me an inquiry, and it's $25 by itself.
You're making reference to calling support for administration.
Okay, with Adobe Premiere, they charge $25 per inquiry until you feel it's been answered, which is like I can afford that. Okay, well, thank you very much.